From the first time a Tory whistled Yankee Doodle to Beyoncé's halftime show, political commentary has been the baseline of some music in the U.S. As BK Live focuses on art and activism this week, and as the results from the election of 2016 fire up a new era of protest, it's a good time to look at how the link between music and politics has evolved over time and what it might look like over the next few years. We're very lucky to have on set today to discuss the topic Wes Jackson, president of the Brooklyn Bodega and executive director of the Brooklyn Hip Hop Festival. Welcome back to BK Live, Wes.
Right.
Reggie Osei, a veteran entertainment lawyer known as Combat Jack on his amazing podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And Matthew Allen, who is on staff here at BRIC and is also an accomplished music journalist with work published by Ebony, Jet, and his own blog, Well Dressed Headphone Addict. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Very
aptly
much.
named, very well dressed.
Thank you so much.
Matt, let's start with you. So we could probably go back to ancient Mesopotamia and find music that has some sort of political content.
Oh, absolutely.
When you talk about popular music in modern times, in the U.S. especially, it seems like some forms of music, it's taken a while to get there. It took rock and roll a long time to get from rock around the clock to the political stuff that we heard during the civil rights era in the 1960s, Vietnam. Is that generally true? There's like a warm-up period for genres, or does some go right to the political stuff?
I think the warm-up did happen in that time in the 1960s. I know a lot of, for black music, there's lots of subtleties that had to be put in, like Sam Cooke's Chain Gang and A Change Is Gonna Come, you know, the boom shakalaka that goes into Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself, and sort of little subtle things that you have to feed into it. Once What's Going On came on, it basically opened the floodgates for being able to be pretty blatant about your political affiliations and your social constructs as far as how you want to express yourself in music, and that opened things up for Curtis Mayfield, Stevie Wonder, and a host of others.
Reggie, about hip-hop, for you, your experience of it as a consumer of it, was it political from the get-go, or is that something one discovered over time?
I think initially as an art form originated, it was really more, entertainment, like party music, something to play at parties. But I think once the genre really took an art form as a legitimate genre, like a legitimate art form, particularly with the damaging effects during the crack era, the Reagan era, artists really realized the power of the platform that they had and really started using their voice as a weapon.
And what for you was the moment when that, is there a particular artist with Public Enemy?
Public Enemy.
Absolutely.
And NWA. It's weird that we live in a time right now where Public Enemy sounds so prophetic with regard to police brutality that's been rampant throughout the nation.
I think political music is inherently prophetic just in general. Like you talked about Public Enemy, it takes a nation of millions, and things like Shut 'Em Down from Apocalypse 1991, things like Fight the Power, they make more sense now than they did when they were made. Same thing with What's Going On, or even a song like Stakes is High by De La Soul,
James Brown.
Well, let's talk about, so Wes, when you think about hip-hop as a genre, folk music, the social commentary is sort of like hardwired into what it basically is. For you, what role does the social activist side play in hip-hop as a genre? Is that central to it? Is it a kind of fringe element? Like how much a part of the soul of the art form is social commentary?
Well, I would think it's central to it, and some of the problems we're in, I think as a nation, is because we've all sort of let that slide a little bit and get a little bit too much into the entertainment aspect of it. And I think one of the silver linings of this, I think Chuck from allhiphop.com tweeted, like, the upside of Trump is that conscious hip hop is going to return.
Hopefully.
I think, it could, but this is, I think you're seeing a sort of an awakening of this, of like, do you really want to spend your time talking about strip clubs and Molly anymore when this dude is literally talking about a deportation force? I think some artists it's gonna wake up some. Some will continue to just ignore it. I mean, it happened, as Reggie said, in the crack era, but I think it's gonna come back. But just to sort of add on, I think you go back to the message, Grandmaster Flash,
Oh, yes.
We were partying in the first, and then very quickly, we realized that this is going to be our social commentary, and broken glass everywhere that Billy Mel said. Then you have the broken glass theory, the connections between policy, straight policy, and hip-hop. I think a straight line can be drawn. So I think it is hip-hop's job to call out this this monster that was elected, and organize to to push him back out.
And what do you think is the most effective way? I mean, I suppose they can both be effective, but as an artist, you can go direct, smack people in the face with the truth, or you can be a little more subtle about it. And I'm sure both ways have been tried in hip hop. Do you think one is more effective for the era we're in now?
Yeah, I'm not an artist, so it's hard for me to say. I am an educator and somewhat of an activist or evangelist, so I say go hard, like punch him right in the face. I don't know what you're waiting for. I'm not sure why you want to be subtle. Now, maybe if you're Beyonce or Drake, you need to be subtle because being political is going to too much of a shock to your system. But I think you have Tribe Called Quest came out, and you see Q-Tip is like, I'm not playing any games.
Oh yeah.
I'm telling you what I'm talking about. I think that's the approach that I take. This is a disaster barreling down, and we're acting like maybe I should roll up the windows or maybe I shouldn't. The hurricane is coming. You got to batten down the hatches and prepare. I'm not sure what would be if you were go the subtle route, like. What's
how do you tiptoe around this?
Yeah, how do you tiptoe around a hurricane?
I think both approaches are helpful and effective. One of the things we saw with Public Enemy is at a certain point, their message became less relevant because it turned off a lot of their fans. One thing youth don't like to be is lectured to. They don't like to be preached to. And I think sometimes you have to couch the message around entertainment so that there's this nugget, this seed that's planted that grows on its own. Once it's planted.
It's what KRS-One dubbed edutainment.
Edutainment. I mean, you can't, I mean, you still, at the end of the day, what made Public Enemy's voice so prevalent is that it knocked. It was amazing music that banged in the clubs, out of the Jeeps, and on the radio. And it forced us to look at the issues. But there are so many artists throughout the decades that subtly planted seeds. And when you think back, like, wow, he really said that. When you listen to Jay-Z, at the same time that he's bragging about selling crack, but also the damaging effect that it had on his family when on the record, You Must Love Me. If that's not one of the most poignant social commentaries ever made within the past 25 years in hip-hop, I don't know what that is.
Biggie's Suicidal Thoughts, where it talks about how being a drug dealer has affected his mother and the mother of his child, and he thinks about killing himself because...
And mental health issues in the black community that we don't speak about. But at the same time, in his delivery, Biggie didn't stand up on a soapbox.
Yes.
He just told a story.
I just think...
So I'm curious, like all forms of music, hip-hop is an art form and it's also a business. And I'm wondering, artists who take a very strong stand, Brian mentioned the Dixie Chicks during his intro, they run some risks of commercial punishment for that, either that the sales won't be there or the record companies won't want to hear from them anymore. Do you think that risk has abated over time?
I think that risk has intensified because we become this nation that has decided to ignore the ills of our society. And we walk around with these rose-tinted lenses that we must live in a PC age. So if you criticize, whereas before you could criticize the police, police force and not get as much pushback, and now that there's a real issue, you can't say anything or you're anti-police. So I think there's much more risk at stake right now, especially as hip-hop has become the most dominant form of popular music throughout the world.
Plus the fact that we've gotten so used to not hearing political music for more than a decade, and used to hearing people glorify violence and talk about being at a strip club, talk about partying and drugs and things, that once the social aspect of it gets introduced, it's almost like it came out of nowhere and it's kind of a hard pill to swallow.
Wes, what do you think the impact on audiences is? It's a question, I guess, is the music leading or is it following? Is it opening our eyes or making us feel better about the rage or the sadness or the fear we feel? What do you think the role, how do audiences experience it?
Yeah, that's a good point about whether we're leading or following. I never really thought about that. I think it is very much a symbiotic relationship. So did Q-Tip write those songs because of the Black Lives Matter protests or the Black Lives Matter influence him? I think there's a confluence of going, back and forth. But I do think what is clear is once it starts to bubble up, the artists are the leaders. And I think these artists, if they're not going to be a leader in this time, then I would ask for them to move aside and just play in the strip clubs and remove yourself from the conversation. But people will follow, you know, what they say and what they do and how they dress and adopt their policies. So, you know, I think artists are going to have to make that choice. Do you want to, you know, sort of acquiesce to maybe what Leor Cohen and 300 Entertainment wants you to do? Or are you going to say, I'm just saying, you think about it. I mean, you think about it. I'm saying this is not, we know the next Public Enemy is not going to come out on 300. It's just not going to happen.
So let me ask this.
But you got to step up.
The past week has been very difficult for a lot of people absorbing what happened. And many of us retreat to music to kind of give us some strength. As we wrap this up, what did you go to? What have you been listening to over the past week that you feel gives you some inspiration or safe harbor? Start with you, Matt.
Well, Solange's new album, A Seat at the Table, that was one of the first things that I went to.
It's the hardest record.
Yeah, the song Fubu.
She's spitting it harder than most of you rappers, all you rappers.
Yes, the song Fubu in particular, when she was talking to the white counterparts that talk about appropriating black culture. Don't be mad if you can't sing along. Just be glad you have the whole wide world. This is for us. Some things you can't touch. That's the most gangster, most, you know, relevant statement that any artist could have made. So I see at the table, like Wes was saying, A Tribe Called Quest, their song Space Program, their song We the People. Those songs are like the things that I really go to really just grab.
Reggie, how about you?
Well, the past week, I mean, I've totally been studying the Tribe Called Quest. Not only because it's momentous in that it's their first album in 18 years. It's Phife Dawg's posthumous work, and it sounds so relevant and so vibrant. But also hearing the subtle and not so subtle, you know, messages with regard to, you know, what's going on. Like, I wonder when they recorded this album, because it sounds like they recorded the album the day of the election, because some of the things that are so relevant today, a week later.
Yeah. Wes, I'm sorry, we have to close, but real quick, what's your nomination?
No, it's the Tribe album. We could just to echo all that stuff, but to throw it back in there's another artist, Jay Electronica, who I've been listening to
Where's
a
Jay's
lot.
album, though?
Well, don't start.
That's a whole other segment.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Good stuff to listen to. Really appreciate it. Excellent conversation, and 4 years to continue it.